good. Start the recording. And hi, Lissa, it's Jana. Oh, Johnny, how do I pronounce your last name?
Johnny Crowder.
Oh, I was right. Perfect. So I'm going to get us ready. And Lissa, I'm here with Johnny Crowder, and we're going to get started on his episode. And I'm super excited about it. So 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to Oh My Health. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm here with Johnny Crowder. Johnny is a 28-year-old suicide and abuse survivor, a TEDx speaker, touring musician, and the founder and CEO of Cope Notes, a text-based mental health platform that provides daily support to users in nearly 100 countries across the globe. With 10 years of clinical treatment and psychology degree from UCF, and a full decade of peer support and advocacy through the National Alliance on Mental Illness under his belt, Johnny's youthful vigor for the topic of mental health is unmatched. Whether speaking at events or touring with his band, Johnny's infectious positivity and firsthand experience with mental illness uniquely equipped him to provide realistic yet hopeful insight into the pains of hardship with authenticity, levity, and wit. And oh my gosh, Johnny, we were just talking before we started recording, and I cannot wait till you guys hear this story and get to hear from him a little bit. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I am pumped. Anytime I can kind of squeeze mental health into a health conversation, it's like a small victory for me.
Well, we are going to try to squeeze it in this whole episode because I think
Heck yeah.
it's such a powerful message right now. But before we start, I ask all of our guests to share a small story of hope with the world, because I believe the stories inside of us are the messages of hope and miracles that people are waiting to hear.
Yeah, I kind of like I mentioned earlier, I feel like my little story of hope is one big story of hope. And honestly, if you zoomed in too close, my life would probably feel like a lot of little stories of disappointment. If you zoom in super, super close, it might look like, this certain day was a failure because I didn't achieve this goal or because I struggled with this. But if you zoom out, I think that's when it becomes sort of a collage of hope made up of a bunch of tiny disappointments. But honestly, just so people have a background on who I am, I grew up in a really unsafe environment, and I was exhibiting symptoms of mental illness really, really young. Like most people assume, oh, maybe you're a teenager and you start developing symptoms. I was pre-elementary school. I was a toddler, self-harming, hallucinating, and those behaviors did not wane as I got older. They got worse and worse. And pretty much my entire childhood, before treatment, during treatment, I was pretty convinced that things would only get worse. That with each year that went by, I knew that, how I felt in sixth grade was way worse than fifth grade, and seventh grade was way worse than sixth grade. So I figured, you look at the line graph and you see, wow, my symptoms are getting worse and worse. And I figured that would continue exponentially. And now I'm as on the other side of it as you can be. I mean, I'm living in recovery. I am dealing with my diagnoses every day, but to imagine my younger self, if you would have asked me, will things get better? Will you ever make a difference in the world? Will you ever feel fulfilled? Will you ever feel calm or safe? My answer would be no to all of those things. And now, to be 28, to work full-time in the mental health field, to write music that brings hope to people, to do public advocacy, I picture every time I speak at a conference or an event or school or prison, whatever, I look out and I kind of picture a bunch of younger me's. I picture like 9-year-old me and 12-year-old me and 15-year-old me, and they're all looking at 28-year-old me like, what? I feel like I finally get to help people like me feel seen. And I wouldn't wish my childhood on anybody, but it's been incredible to see how it's come full circle.
I want to talk about the generation you grew up in and the generation I grew up in, because there's a stigma with mental health. And we were just talking about that. When I grew up, we didn't diagnose children. If they were acting out or having issues at a young age, they were not diagnosed or labeled, bad. There's something wrong with them, right? We weren't diagnosing them, and we were shameful of it. We hid them. We suppressed it. We would tell them they were bad. And so they lived in a space where they grew up hiding it, suppressing it, not talking about it, or even reaching out for help for it. You're in a different generation. And you know what? It's even getting better now. It's just getting better. But you're in a generation where some of the stigma is starting to go away. But let me tell you, for those of you who are having mental health issues, especially with your children, it's difficult. And how many of you as moms sometimes don't say anything? Or we want to put that label on everything they do, right? The other way, we want them to live that label because it's just easier to say, oh, he's so-and-so, or he has this, or he's doing that. And so then we make them live that label. How do you find that sweet spot, like of getting out there and sharing that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I totally empathize with everything you just said. When I was growing up, my parents kind of oscillated between, we need to take him to a doctor, and look the other way, la, 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 like fingers in the ears. And I wasn't actually formally diagnosed until high school because I think my parents were kind of, everyone, including myself, we were all buying into this collective delusion that it would stop one day if we just totally ignored it. But it was getting a lot worse. And at the same time, I see people going around now saying, oh, I'm so OCD, I need to straighten this painting or something. And it's like, so you'll call that OCD, but then if you can't touch a human being for 6 years like me, that's not OCD. That's just because I'm particular. I like things a certain way, or I'm germ conscious. So I think a big component of me doing advocacy is to help people. Like you said, there is a sweet spot. It's not that everything you do is OCD, for example. I'm just picking one diagnosis. It's not that your entire personality revolves around a diagnosis, but it's also not, it might not just be that you are particular, that you just like things a certain way. I think what's important is remembering that a diagnosis is a detail. So if I were to tell you 5 facts about who I am, I would say I like cars, like we just discussed. I collect sneakers. I listen to metal music. I am diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I like to ride my bike. And those are all equal weight details of my life. And unfortunately, we take diagnoses and we elevate them. So we say, whoa, schizophrenia, that's way more important than riding a bike. And it's like, well, you must not know how much I like riding my bike. It's just details.
I love that. I love too that you slip it into every day because it's part of your everyday life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes part of your everyday. And I love that you don't use that label for everything, right? There's more to you than just that label. So how do you not live by that label when you go out into the world?
Well, I will say that other people kind of um, get scared with those words. Like if they hear schizophrenia or they hear depression, sometimes a conversation can get hung up on it. But I think there's something magical about breezing past something like that, not burying it and leaving it out, but just sort of saying it casually, like I did earlier. I mean, think about it. If you broke your ankle and someone is like, oh, what happened to your ankle? You'd be like, man, I was skiing and totally not ready for the bunny slope, and I smashed my ankle. I'll be out of a cast in a while. And you can, believe it or not, you can say, yeah, I just had a really, really, really depressing weekend. um Finally talked to my aunt for the first time in a long time. She's not doing super well, and I was just really, really bummed the whole weekend. So I'm definitely glad to be out of that. It's all about framing. And I think that if you are an individual who deals with any sort of mental health issue, which I would argue that everyone does to a certain extent, you have an opportunity to share in such a way that invites other people to be themselves, to let their guards down. And it's, so I talk a lot about consent and sobriety and things that are kind of taboo. And it's funny when people tell me, like, I was abused as a child or something, and they're like, what, you're not going to go, what? Or that's terrible. And I'm like, no, you're telling me about your life and I'm listening. And people feel very relieved when there's not that like alarmist response.
Wow. You know what? One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is in your bio that I read, and it said that you had been suicidal. And right now, with so much going on in the world in so many different areas, like we're being torn, like people say 2020 was the worst year ever. Not for me. I was breathing. To me, it was just as good as 2019.
Mm.
But having said that, there's a lot of people who are not recognizing that we literally in 2019 lost 2 people in our family to suicide. And here's the thing, I am in that field and I didn't recognize it. They didn't speak
Mm.
out. I didn't see the symptoms. I did not recognize it. Why do you think that is, that we're going around our lives and not noticing somebody's in need of help from us?
So this might be, I'll just share a quick anecdote related to this. This might not apply to everybody listening. It might not apply to your family, but it certainly applied to me growing up. Also, if you are watching this and you're seeing the video, I have tardive dyskinesia, which is an involuntary movement disorder. So I'm on an exercise ball and I am bouncing back and forth so that I can stay focused. That's normalization right there. But when I was growing up, I had this tight knit group of friends, and there were about 10 of us, and it was like the odds and ends from every social group. Like I didn't fit in with the jocks or the nerds or the, comic book kids, which that was a thing at my high school. So it was like the odds and ends of all these different groups. We were very close with each other. And throughout this entire time, I was self-harming, very, very severe disordered eating, to the point of having some pretty unfortunate health issues related to it. And literally hallucinating, very violent mood swings, like punching and destroying property. I had a lot of behavioral health issues, and never once did any of my friends bring it up to me. For this entire period, we were so close, talked all the time, saw each other all the time. And then now, I think it was a couple years ago, after I'd been to school for psych and I learned a lot about what I was going through, I asked my friends, did any of you guys know what I was going through? Like, did any of you guys have any idea? And I thought they were going to say, no, you did such a good job of staying composed and shaving your face and ironing your shirt and looking like you had it put together. And they were all like, oh yeah, we all knew, we just didn't know how to talk about it. And it was really surprising to me. And at first I was upset with them, but then I thought, this is a cultural issue. We have such a difficult time discussing this that people who are going through it, we feel like we can't tell our friends and family. And then people on the outside can often feel like they don't want to touch it because they are maybe uneducated about the signs, about things to look for. They're not 100% sure how to start the conversation if they even want to. So at first I was looking at like, how dare my friends not do anything? And then I zoom out and think, wow, this whole thing could be different with advocacy. If people knew how and that they could share, and people knew how to look and what to look for.
So I guess the magic question would be, how do we bridge that gap? How do we, and by the way, we are doing so much already. We still have so much more to do. But if you look back 50 years ago, what it
Mhm.
looked like and what it looks like today, it's definitely better, but it could be so much better. How do you think we could start bridging that gap? What are some little steps we can take? Because by the way, if each of us take one little step, that's literally a giant step for this.
Oh yeah. I am a big fan of like small incremental change. So I'm 100% with you. I don't think any one person has to shoulder this themselves. I think the answer is way simpler. Listeners might be like, oh, maybe I'll start a coalition, or maybe, no, no, no. If every person listening to this podcast opened up to one friend or family member about how they felt and invited that friend or family member to do the same, if everyone listening to this podcast did that once, we would see like a community shift. You don't have to write a TED talk. You don't have to record a video. You don't have to put on your makeup. You call up a friend or family member and just kind of share organically, and then maybe ask them if they've experienced anything similar. And I'm telling you, when I started doing advocacy, when I would say bipolar, even just bipolar, schizophrenia is definitely the one where people's eyebrows perk up, but even like bipolar and depression, anxiety, people would kind of go, huh? And now 10 years into advocacy, some people go, oh yeah, my aunt has bipolar 2. And I'm like, oh, I have bipolar 1. And to be able to talk about it like that, all of a sudden those people don't see me as a monster. They have a frame of reference. They know a real human being, not a character on TV in a straitjacket or something. They know a real human being that they love and care about who has the same diagnosis. And the only way they could know that is if that friend or family member told them. So if we all open up and say the words, they will become much less scary.
Honestly, great things are built with those baby steps. Do you know, have you ever heard of March of Dimes?
I have not, but that sounds very familiar.
So March of Dimes was started during the Depression, the Great Depression. And it was because President Roosevelt wanted to find a cure for polio. Does anyone have polio anymore? And the reason it was March of Dimes is because back then, during this huge, horrible time for the country and nobody had money, he thought if everybody gave one dime towards the cure, everyone can afford one dime, you know? And if everyone gave one dime, we could find a cure for polio. Well, we marched of dimed ourselves to the cure of polio
That's
during a
amazing.
horrible time, right? Where people were starving and living on the streets. So those little
Wow.
steps really create massive change.
Oh, I love the idea. So when I was growing up, I used to think that I didn't have power. I didn't have control. Like, I'm just a kid. I hear kids say that a lot. I'm just a kid. What are you talking about? Like, I wish that everyone understood the level of authority that they have in their own pocket of life. If you're a C-suite executive, if you're a janitor, if you're a stay-at-home parent, if you're a cousin, you have influence. And that illustrates it so beautifully. Think about it. If one person had to foot that bill, you couldn't find someone who could afford it. But if everyone gave 10 cents, it's so wholesome. I
Can you
love it.
imagine if everyone on our planet gave 1 hour of community service? Just one. Every
Yeah.
single person for the whole year. They just gave 1 hour a year for community service, showing up in their community and doing something of service. How that could change the world. It's like, it's not a lot and you don't have to burden everything on your shoulders. So getting out and talking about a family member that might have mental health issues and reaching out, that person might be waiting to hear that so they could say, oh, I do too. I've never said that, but I do too.
Yes.
So I
Everyone
love
is
that
waiting.
community.
Everyone is waiting for so did you ever find out that someone had a party and you said, "Oh, my invitation must have been lost in the mail or something," and you're joking? I think everyone is waiting for an invitation to be themselves. I think everyone is kind of checking their mailbox, looking out the blinds for the Amazon delivery guy, hoping that someone will invite them to be honest, to say, yeah, honestly, I'm having a lot of mood regulation issues. I feel like sometimes I'm really, really high, sometimes I'm really low. I don't know exactly what's causing it. To create a space where someone feels safe enough to say that, I'm telling you, that is literally priceless. That is transformative, and you don't need money. You don't need a degree. You don't need all of these pre-qualifiers to create that environment for someone that you love.
Wow. I'm loving this conversation. I'm wondering from you seeing both sides, right? Because we can sit here not having to struggle with that, not having to have gone through your journey. And we can sit here, it's so easy looking in to say, well, why didn't you do this? Why couldn't you do that?
Mm-hmm.
How hard was it to do this? But having gone through it and seeing both sides, how do you show up now and serve the community? How are you getting that message out and opening doors?
Yeah. So I want to answer this, but I want to mention one thing that a very, very brilliant friend of mine said once. Uh, Her name is Kristen, and she runs Mental Health News Radio Network. And she said this, and it's stuck with me ever since. She said, if there was a magical button that if you pressed it, you would feel better forever, and it was on your nightstand, but you didn't have the strength to get out of bed, the button wouldn't matter. That has stuck with me forever. And in fact, it's a big reason why I go about advocacy the way that I do. We tell people, if you're feeling in need, reach out. And it's kind of like saying, if your legs are broken, just climb up this flight of stairs to get help.
Somebody will be there to help you.
Yeah. And, everything I do now revolves around mental health advocacy. So I'm in a band. I'll just overview them quickly. I'm in a band called Prison, and we sing about mental and emotional health issues, sobriety, consent, all of the topics that I've mentioned. And it's metal. It's really heavy metal. And we go into these dark, dingy bars and we play this really heavy music. And then at the merch table, we have people lining up to share similar experiences and talk about how these songs provide hope. And the same when I speak at events, I talk about my lived experience. I help people stop judging themselves for what they're experiencing. And they open up and start sharing not only with me, but with their friends, family members, teachers, etc. And then I run, like you said in my bio, I run a mental health platform called Cope Notes, and it's designed to do the things that I just said, but at scale. So I can't help 5 million people at once, but Cope Notes can. It's a peer support tool, and we have users in, like you said, almost 100 countries around the world. And it's designed to help people build healthier thought patterns, to reduce their own self-stigma, to improve their emotional independence, which is crucial, and to basically train their brain to interrupt negative thought patterns and provide a catalyst for positive thought, so that over time your brain starts thinking, forging those neural pathways, and starts to basically become comfortable with positive thought patterns. So everything I do from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, whether it's music or mental health related advocacy or running Cope Notes, whatever it is, it's about you. I'll say this. This is the last thing I'll say on it because I don't want to rant. Once you've felt a really deep pain, the rest of your life is about trying to alleviate it for other people. And I think that anyone who has felt a very, very deep personal pain is acutely aware when they see that in other people, and they want to do everything they can to help.
You know what? I created my entire business because of a deep, deep pain and fear that I was able to get beyond. And I had to let people hear that message. I had to let people know not to give up, because I had a choice. I could have said, okay, I accept what you're telling me and I give up. I just will lay down and die. Or I can say, no, I want to be here for whatever reason and push through it. And so I was given 2 weeks to live. And here I am 10 years later. And for all of you who know me, I did not cure anything. I still live in that diagnosis, but I don't just live in it, I thrive in it. So you
Amazing.
can absolutely thrive in that. And one of the things, as you're talking, one of the things I think about is a difference in the generations always, because when you get to my age, you don't give a crap what people think. You don't, like, you're just like, yeah, I'm crazy, right? Or yeah, I'm doing this, or yeah, like I know that, this is my issue, and you just don't care. But I can tell you, my 20-year younger person would have not. It'd have been horrified to put something wrong about me out there, or something I felt wasn't in the norm. And here's the thing, everything you have inside of you, everything is in the norm. It's in your norm. It's beautiful. Embrace it and figure out how to thrive in it, right?
Yeah, I always tell people, because people will ask me, like, how do I get started in advocacy? And I say, well, you have to consider two things before you start advocacy. Number one, you have to consider that this will have an impact on your life, and not all of it will be positive. I've been fired for my mental health being public, not even because I had a mental health issue in the workplace, but because they felt uncomfortable having my name associated with things like rape and suicide on Google. And then I've also had girls like stop dating me, like ghost me after they do a Google search and read about my history, and they're like, oh, too much baggage. And that will happen, but you have to think about this. You could either pretend to be someone that people fall in love with, or you could be 100% yourself, and people will eventually fall in love with that. So it's a delayed gratification thing. If I pretended to be someone who everybody would like, I would have 100 people who kind of like me. But instead, if I'm 100% myself, I have 10 people, so an order of magnitude less, 10 people who love me, true friends, true people who care about me. And if you go quality over quantity, you'll never regret it when it comes to relationships.
You know, last year we had Brett Lockett on the podcast, and he's a former NFL player, and he's phenomenal. And he said exactly what you said, almost verbatim. You have the power to write your own story. Don't let anyone else take that power from you. And being authentically you in their face, they're either going to embrace it or walk away from it. And those who walk away from it are okay. That's okay. That they're not part of your journey, and you
Yeah.
just it's okay. And I love that you're saying you have that within you to write your own story. Don't let anybody else do that for you.
I know. And I also thought this too when I was growing up. I always thought people were looking at me, right? I had really bad social anxiety. So I would like walk in the lunchroom at school and be like, ugh, what are they thinking? What are these people thinking about my hair or about my pants? Or, is it my backpack? Is my backpack zipper open? I'd check my backpack. And I didn't realize two really important things. So number one, everyone's so worried about what they look like. Everyone's thinking that exact thought, whether they'll tell you or not. Everyone's wondering if they're sounding or looking stupid. So you don't have to worry about it. But second, you're going to be weird no matter what. People are going to stare no matter what. So either people can look at you and make assumptions based on what you look or say, or how you look or what you say. That's going to happen either way. So whether you're looking way A, you look super clean cut, or you look super shaggy, there's going to be assumptions made. If you tell 100% the truth or 50% truth, 50% lies, assumptions will be made. So I'm a big proponent of the idea that it takes less work to be somebody else than it does to be yourself. So when I used to tour in a band called Dark Sermon, this was years ago, um, it tour would wear me out. I would be exhausted because I had to be this real metal guy, long hair, candles and animal bones. And I'm on stage in these big Doc Marten boots and the vest, and it felt like work. But in my current band, Prison, I throw on a pair of leggings with flowers on them and I dance around on stage, and it feels like fun. And the only difference is that in Dark Sermon, I was trying to be somebody. And in Prison, I'm allowing myself to be who I already am.
I love that. I mean, that's a great way to end this, but can you please tell everyone how they can get involved? How can they find your app? How can they connect with you and become part of your community?
Heck yes. I hope everyone does. So if you go to copenotes.com, you will find everything. We have a podcast on there. We obviously have subscriptions. And I want to say this: Cope Notes uses text messages to improve mental and emotional health. Yes, but it's not just for people living with a diagnosis. So if you have a cell phone and a brain, I built Cope Notes for you. And we also have gift subscriptions, so you can give one to a friend or family member. And I just want to say one last thing about all of this, about this entire conversation. If you have listened to this episode so far and you've thought, my wife really needs to listen to this, or wow, this episode would be good for my coworker. No, it's good for you too. You have a brain, and the fact that you've listened to this entire thing to this point tells me that you find it kind of interesting. So follow that rabbit. You will never regret investing in your own mental health. I promise you that. I can tell you from experience.
Can I tell you as a mindset coach that I would do Cope Notes, because that's exactly what I'm telling people to do. Reframe those things in your brain. And the minute you do, your brain it has no choice. It goes towards them, right? So if you're thinking something, especially about ourselves, how many times my butt's too big and this dress look okay on me? My hair's out of place, right? Oh, you can't look at me. I don't have makeup on. But
Mm.
that's our inner self telling us that you are beautiful exactly how you are. And the rest is just icing, right? It's extra. So I would recommend everyone grabbing that app and sharing it with a friend. Remember, if everyone grabs that app and shares it with one person, think of the change, that ripple effect of change you're putting out into the world.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Johnny. I really appreciate it. This has been really important to me hearing about mental health. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if anyone listening wants to connect with me, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. My email is johnny@copenotes.com, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.